Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get started, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps my channel a lot. I also love to get comments, so feel free to leave a comment if you'd like. Today I'm going to be doing a pendant, and I thought it'd be kind of fun. I had one of my patrons, Lisa, send me some cool stones, and some of them were Fordite. And if you've never heard of Fordite, Fordite is actually made from the accumulated layers of paint on painting booths in car manufacturing factories. So after a while, after it gets so thick from soaking up all of the overspray in different layers of different colors, they break it out and they cut it like stones, and it comes out to be pretty cool. So I have a few pieces of that she sent me, and I'm going to make well, it's kind of a modern sort of material, so I'm gonna make kind of a modern looking pendant. So we'll see how it turns out. Before we get started, though, I wanted to thank my patrons over on Patreon. It's a really nice group of people. They're so full of knowledge, and I've had a great time getting to know a lot of them. And I think it's a really nice place that we've developed over there. So thank you guys for all of your support. The other group I want to thank is my YouTube subscribers. We've got a growing group. I think by the time this gets published, we should be over 8,400 subscribers, which is amazing. Thank you all for that. I appreciate it. I also appreciate the financial contributions, like when people buy me a coffee. That helps out so much with buying supplies. I go through quite a bit of supplies doing 3 videos a week, so thank you for that. I appreciate that. All right, well, let's get started on this project. So let's see what I drew up today. This is my design idea book. I draw up my designs when I'm getting ready to do a project. I like them because they have a little kind of grid in the background, which helps me to keep things sort of symmetrical. Okay, let's see. So this is Fordite. You can see it's kind of because of the different layers of paint that they've cut through with their lapidary equipment, create kind of cool designs. It comes in lots of different colors because there's lots of different paint colors. So this one has a little bit of red in it, so I thought it might be nice if I could find something that kind of matched it. And this red coral is pretty close. So I want to make kind of a long, sleek, modern-looking pendant. One of those ones that kind of plunges low on your neckline. And I think for the materials I'm going to need, I'm going to make a little bail out of some number 5 low dome round wire. I'll make the bezel out of 3/16 inch fine silver bezel and 26 gauge on all of these. I'll use a little scrap wire to make the little silver balls. Probably going to use 12 gauge square for the little bar, and then 14 gauge square to create a border around the piece of coral there. I don't know, I'll use a little piece of 18 gauge round or something to hook the bail on. Other than that, it's going to be pretty straightforward. I think it'll be a nice piece, but we got to make 3 bezels, so that'll take a little bit. Probably make 1 bezel on camera, and then I'll do the rest off camera, so you don't have to watch me do the same thing over and over again. Let's start with one of these. So for the back of the bezel, I'm going to use 22 gauge. Normally I'd use 26, but since structurally this is going to be soldered to the base of that bezel, I want it to be a little stiffer material than 26, which is pretty flimsy, so that it has something solid to solder to, because it's going to be partially soldered to the outside of the bezel, partially soldered to the bottom. So that'll give us a little bit stiffer, stronger pendant. Well, let's get started on that bezel. Okay, if you've never been to my channel before, I use hard silver sheet solder. And I use a spray-on flux called My-T-Flux. The other questions people always ask me, these are Fisker's craft shears. They're available at most hobby stores. And my torch is a Silversmith model torch. It's an acetylene air, and I've been using that for years, and it's a great torch. So we never want to do a bezel on a corner, start a bezel on a corner, I should say. Let's file the end of this first, and we'll decide where we want to start. So I'm going to manually make some sharp bends, since this has relatively sharp corners on it. Make a straight up and down bend there. Kind of get that angle right, like that. Try and grab it right where that corner is. You don't want to have a lot of extra space when you have sharp corners on a stone, because it's already challenging to get those corners to bend nicely over the, or the bezel's corners to bend nicely over the corner of the stone. So you have to, if you have a lot of excess bezel, it makes it even harder. Make a little scratch here. I always leave a little bit beyond where they meet so I can file some down to get it flat. We got a little more excess space than I wanted, so I'm going to cut this, take a little piece out. So you got quite a bit of leeway there. So I cut it a little bit big. So I'm going to take a little slice out of there, right where I soldered it, and I'll just resolder it. So, now let me find some 22 gauge sheet. Solder that down. These aren't exactly symmetrical, so I'm going to try and make sure I put the right side up. When you have asymmetrical stones, I've occasionally soldered the bezel on upside down like that. I suppose everybody does that once or twice. Hopefully you notice early on before you complete your piece. I've had a couple of times that I didn't, and then I was unhappily surprised to find that I needed to start over. So nobody wants that. Okay, solder here. Probably. That should probably be enough. The thing about using a little bit thicker sheet is the sheet underneath the bezel is harder to get up to temperature because there's a lot more mass in it, and the bezel is exposed to the heat more up top. And so beginners oftentimes have trouble getting their bottom sheet hot enough before they overexpose the bezel to the heat. You can deal with that in a couple of ways. One, you can lift up the sheet and heat from beneath it, or you can just be very careful, to kind of avoid the bezel itself, but really try and pump the heat into the sheet. Once it starts flowing, that usually doesn't take too long. But the bezel will reach temperature just easily. So the trick is to get them both to that temperature without melting the top one. Okay, for this one I'm just going to go ahead and cut it right up against the bezel there. Just do a little filing to get this cleaned up. Want it flush with the edge of the bezel. Thought about doing a big cuff bracelet today, but I wasn't feeling it. Alright, so that's one. I'm going to go ahead and make bezels for the other two. And it's going to be pretty much the same as that, so I'll be right back. Got my bezels made, and the last thing I need to do as far as bezels go is that I was going to put 14 gauge square wire around this middle one, so let's do that. Got a little piece of 14 gauge square. I'm going to set these over here in this little tray so I don't lose track of them. 2 videos ago, I think it was, I swept this little tiny stone right onto the floor, and I spent about 10 minutes crawling around on the floor looking for it. So just like before, I'm not going to do this on the corner. I'm going to bend them so that the join is on one of the sides. Square wire, when you bend it sharply, has a tendency to try to twist on you because you're compressing this part, you're stretching this part, so it tries to find an easier way to bend. So you have to kind of like correct that twist as it happens, as you go. Sometimes to help me figure out where I'm going to make the next bend, I use some Sharpie so I can make a sharp scratch through it where it needs to be. I'll leave just a little bit extra for filing purposes. Cut that off and file it. I'm going to go ahead and solder it, and then I'll be able to fine tune it, I think, after that. So let's close this up. Make sure it's all even. Well, if you notice, but I do a lot of pick soldering. If you're interested in learning how to pick solder, I'll put a link right up there for you. There's a video about it that I made. It's one of those skills that really helps me a lot when I learned how to do it. Mostly speed-wise, but also being able to place solder in a real specific spot that might be hard to balance a piece on. It's sitting nice and flat on the bottom. So to solder this on, I'm going to make a square of solder pieces. What I really want is no gaps between the two. So I want to use enough solder to, I had it so close that it didn't have a lot of space to work with, so that's kind of what you want. Okay. One thing about, I'm going to say it now because sometimes I forget to mention it when setting stones, but when you're doing corners, a bezel with sharp corners like this, because you're trying to compress a lot of metal over that sharp corner of the stone, oftentimes, because it's sticking up a little bit from the widest part of the stone, when you try to force all that metal in there, there's too much to do it, and it sort of wrinkles and crumples. So a way to do that, or to fix that, is to file the top edge of the bezel right on the corners, about half as thick. You got to be careful not to file all the way through, it doesn't take much. So I'll probably file these down shorter anyway, but that's what I do right prior to setting the stone, is I'll make these tips of these just a little bit thinner. That reduces the quantity of metal you're trying to compress into the corners. Other people have different solutions for sharp corners on bezels. That's the best one I've ever found. I think, do I want these to be sharp? I kind of want them to be sharp cornered, but I don't know. Maybe not sharp. Alright. I think let's find some scrap wire and make some balls. Proportionally, I want them to be about that size, so I have to kind of estimate how long of a piece of scrap wire to cut to make it that big. There's a little piece of 12. I can cut a couple of pieces off of that probably. Kind of going with a really simple setting, because the nature of the stones are sort of chaotic. And I think it's nice when you contrast, a real clean looking setting with a chaotic stone. It seems to come out nice almost every time. At least that's been my experience. Close enough. Okay. So I gotta make a decision how thick I want that to be. This is going to be like this. These are going to be one here, one here. But I want a little stub of square wire coming off, so I don't need it to be hugely long. But I think 12 is a good size for that, so I'm going to cup the end of these with the Dremel real quick. Be right back. Okay, for the bail, I don't want it to be a hugely tall bail, but so I can use some of this. I believe it's number 5. Low dome, number 4. Sorry, I wrote number 5 on this, I think, and it's number 4. So it's generally going to be about twice as long as I cut this. So if I want it to be that big, it's not going to be. That looks like about 3/8 of an inch. Let's see how it is in millimeters. About 9 millimeters. Pretty close guess on 3/8. So about 9 millimeters, so about 18 millimeters. Let's cut this end off. I'm going to add a little bit more. Let's make it 21 millimeters, just to give us a little more room to work with. So to create that taper on this, I'm going to have to make this, basically I'm going to find the center, and then I'm going to taper it down like this, like that, like that, like that. So that's going to take a lot of filing and maybe a little cutting with the saw, I'm not sure, but I'm going to do that real quick. Sorry, I had to put a band-aid on my fingertips. It gets so raw sometimes. It was bleeding a little bit, so. I haven't had much of a chance to make use of that bag balm that Flying Chef gave me the other day. That was nice though. I'll go put some on after this video is done. So I cut it off and then I'm kind of rounding it down so it kind of just tapers down on the sides. I'm just going to smooth that out a little with a white abrasive wheel on the Dremel. Maybe to prevent dinging it up like I just did. So we can use the hammer a little bit. Sometimes you can use the table to get a little more leverage. So, I got it bent over like that. That's going to go right like that. I think I'm going to extend the shape up a little bit like this, so I really need, I'm going to use a little bit of 16 gauge wire, I think. Let me find a longer piece of that. Okay, because this is pretty hard to bend since it's thick wire that I forced around that bail making pliers. I need to get it through here and touching, and so I'll stick it through there like that. Okay, got them touching. Good thing about bails is I don't have to worry too much about anything flowing on here because there's a lot of mass in this piece, but not near as much in this. So if I just heat this and then pick that spot, usually I'm okay. See if I can pull it off today. Okay, I'm gonna pickle this and then we'll come back and set the stones after I polish it. So I got it polished up, and I'm gonna scratch that up a little bit. I'll have to repolish that part. And I set this stone and this stone, but I saved one for you guys. So I thinned out the corners just a skosh, and I do this a little differently than a lot of people. A lot of people use a bezel pusher and then a burnishing tool. I just use the side of this and the rounded part of these. These are my chain nose pliers. I'll start by just kind of making sure the bezel's snug around there. Once I have that pretty snug, then I'm going to go to the corners and kind of roll those over with the flat side. And then I'll start kind of rolling it over in the middle of the big flat sides like that. And then the last step is going to be burnishing, which I use the rounded outer part of the needle nose pliers or the chain nose pliers. I'm just going to kind of rub that top edge pretty smooth. I will go back with a fine polishing wheel on the Dremel and get the tops of those bezels to get them just a little bit smooth, but that's basically what I was shooting for. Kind of a pretty big pendant, but I like it. I think it's sleek and modern. So I hope you enjoyed that. You know, it's fun to try out setting something you've never set before. I've never done Fordite before. I'd only seen it a few times before. I had a student years ago who brought some to class, and I was like, "What is that?" And they explained what it was, and I was like, "Oh, that's really interesting." So, in spite of my stone snobbiness, I kind of like it. Okay, well, I'll get that cleaned up and take some better pictures. Okay, well, that was the Fordite pendant. If you enjoyed that, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button before you leave, that helps out a lot. And leave a comment. But before you go, also, check out my playlist page, because I've split my channel into a number of categories to make it a little bit easier to navigate. And there's things like beginner projects, intermediate projects, advanced projects. There's a list that's all pendants, a list that's all rings, so it makes it easier to find what you're looking for. As we now have about 270 videos, I think, last I looked. So a lot of content and worth checking out. If you like what you see, maybe consider subscribing. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. So the last thing is, in the video description down below, there's some relevant links. There's a Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to help out with some expenses here. That's a great way to do it. And I do appreciate in advance any contributions you make that way. There's also a link to my website. You should check out some of the jewelry for sale over there. There's a lot of pieces that I've made on the channel here, and there's a few other pieces that I made off the channel. So check those out. There's a merch store link where you can get one of those nice design idea books or a coffee mug that's branded with my brand, amongst other things. And finally there's a Patreon link if you want to check out the options for Patreon. There's a number of tiers you can sign up for. The lowest one being just to get rid of the ads on YouTube here. So that would be $5 a month. But check them all out and maybe consider signing up for that. So thank you so much for watching, and take care. Happy silversmithing.